Hello everybody, and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Like this video down below, and subscribe if you're new. And today we're going to be talking about America's favorite governor. Ron DeSantis has been making waves lately, and it's usually been for all the right reason. It goes without saying that he's the best governor in the nation. It also goes without saying that he is the 2024 frontrunner if Donald Trump does not run for re-election. Now, will Trump run for re-election? At this point, I would say that he has higher than a 50-50 chance of doing so, but that would still indicate that there's a sizable chance that he does not actually seek re-election. And in the case that he does not, it's still imperative that we analyze other 2024 contenders. And it seems as though even I would prefer Trump to run again, Ron DeSantis is probably the second best option, and he is growing on me every single day. DeSantis is an Italian-American, Catholic, former veteran, a Harvard grad, a family man, and a former congressman. He rose to the national scene in 2018 when he decided to run for governor of Florida in what was supposed to be a hotly contested race that fall. Being a Trump-endorsed candidate that was well-deserving of his endorsement, he fended off former Agricultural Commissioner Adam Putnam for a 20-point win in the primary. DeSantis stressed the issue of immigration throughout the campaign, but never really had a fully formed policy platform. Even though he had a convincing win in the popular vote over Putnam in the primary, he still lost over 30 counties in the Tampa area and the pro-Trump panhandle, proving that he still had a lot to prove to Trump's base to turn them out in a general election. DeSantis' Democrat opponent in the general election was Andrew Gillum, a quite left-wing candidate to say the least, who was a former mayor of Tallahassee, Florida's capital. Gillum's policies were pretty far left, and he was a self-described progressive that had been endorsed in the primary by the likes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. The socialist attack line stuck to him, which meant he was in danger of losing voters in South Florida, even in an anticipated Democratic wave year. Leading up to the general election, the media tried to smear DeSantis as racist for his "monkey this up" comment in regards to Gillum and his policies.
The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state. That is not going to work. That's not going to be good.
Gillum being black was the main reason for this egregious accusation, and also the fact that the media claimed it was racist because it was a phrase that was apparently never used before or something, which is just not true. These dog whistle conspiracy theorists levying the far-right attack line for DeSantis did not really stick well. DeSantis won at the end of the day, 49.6 to 49.2. He did only win by 33,000 votes or so, but he defeated a rising Democrat star in a D+9 electorate. He also outperformed the RCP polling average for the race by nearly 4 points. Black turnout was up, white working class turnout in the panhandle was down, and DeSantis did not run the best campaign. His charisma was lacking, especially compared to Gillum. Democrats poured a lot of money into this race, and President Obama was routinely in the state campaigning for Gillum, but that did not seem to matter at the end of the day. He cracked 40% with Hispanic voters and did much better than expected with groups such as Puerto Ricans, which foreshadowed Trump's beatdown of Biden in the state and unexpected strength in the Miami metro area. He lost 4 counties that Trump won in 2016, but was able to come through in areas Trump regressed in 2016 enough to win the state. His win marked a bucking of the national trend for the state of Florida and effectively destroyed the whole Florida Democratic Party, with the exception of one woman, of course, but we'll get to her later. As governor, DeSantis easily became one of the most popular governors in the whole country. The same polls that had him losing to Gillum by a lean-to-likely margin had his approval rating north of 65%, and he did so being an unabashedly conservative governor in a swing state. He took action to suspend the awful sheriff in Broward County who bungled the response to several mass shootings. He further cleaned out the Broward swamp by firing Brenda Snipes, who was criticized by many for how she handled the midterms in the county. He flipped Florida's Supreme Court to conservative instantly, appointing 3 solid conservatives to fill vacancies, including Judge Barbara Lagoa, who was briefly considered by Trump to fill the seat belonging to Ruth Bader Ginsburg last fall. He pushed vehemently for education reform and actually took a pro-teacher approach in regards to making the public school system more efficient while still managing to give teachers their pay. This drew contrast from Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, who lost re-election that year in part due to this issue. DeSantis also took a conservationist approach to the wildlife sanctuaries in the state, which is fairly rare for a Republican to do. He banned sanctuary cities in the state for illegal aliens and restricted leftist ballot initiatives from being able to artificially energize the opposition turnout in the state. His approval rating was rolling high into early 2020, and many people started to talk about him being a future presidential candidate. His charisma was developing, as well as his leadership skills as governor. When COVID hit in March, DeSantis refused to call a state of emergency until he truly had to. He locked down the state early on, but was the first governor to quickly ease restrictions a few months later, as he viewed his original method of handling the virus to be ineffective. He never imposed a statewide mask mandate. In fact, he went as far to say he would pardon those who violated local restrictions. Cases did surge for a little while after the restrictions were eased, but over time, the cases decreased significantly. By the numbers, Florida arguably handled the situation much better than states with similar populations like California and New York, especially when you factor in things such as population density, age, and the obesity rate. In June 2020, DeSantis signed into law a mandatory E-Verify bill as he promised. The bill he signed did not technically cover all industries, but covered the many which do actually contract with the government. DeSantis did critique the bill for not going far enough, calling out the Florida GOP establishment in the process. DeSantis also passed a controversial bill disincentivizing riots, which was surprisingly based at a time when Trump could only tweet 3 words about the situation at the time. DeSantis supported Trump during the aftermath of the 2020 election, unlike similar Sunbelt governors such as Brian Kemp and Doug Ducey, both of whom abandoned Trump and his movement instantly. In 2021, DeSantis proposed a bill to fine big tech companies a large sum of money for every day that they censored a Floridian for political speech. The bill that was on his desk was a disappointing shell of whatever was proposed, however, which did not make Ron seem as effective as he usually has been. Still, the bill set precedents and was a step in the right direction, despite being completely toothless unless you were a statewide candidate for office in the state. DeSantis also proposed economic sanctions on China, proving that he may have some protectionist tendencies. But that really has yet to be seen, and there may be some questions about some of his views if and when he decides to enter the national stage. DeSantis also banned critical race theory in the state, ending the indoctrination of our children into a Marxian anti-American school of thought. They only call it critical race theory because it just basically means that the only race you could be critical of is white people. And that was ended under Ron's rule. And arguably the best troll of all, on the first day of Pride Month, he signed a bill that prevented biological men from playing in women's sports. Although the fact that this was a big win for conservatives shows how much we've lost ground in this country, it's a great sign that he actually took a stand on the issue, unlike his South Dakotan counterpart, Kristi Noem. DeSantis has nearly 4 years of a pristine track record heading into 2022, and many politicians on both sides of the aisle see him as a future presidential contender. He's improved a lot in the past 4 years in terms of his charisma, his profile, and his popularity among those who didn't even vote for him. With Florida's rightward trend, I would say that he's guaranteed to win re-election by 5 points at a minimum, even with an ideal Democratic candidate that would bring in tens of millions of dollars in donations. He may even win by 10 to 15 points at this rate, given the state of the opposition party in the state of Florida. Andrew Gillum may have been a drug addict who enjoyed alphabet orgies in hotel rooms, but even he may not be the worst that Florida could do. Running up against Ron and the Democrat primary will likely be a 3-way race between former Republican governor turned Democrat Congressman Charlie Crist, Agricultural Commissioner Nikki Fried, and Congresswoman Val Demings. Now, Demings has not yet announced, and as the least known of the 3, I think she would be the least likely to win the nomination. The only major poll that has been released has Crist up over Nikki Fried by 33 points, and it's easy to see why if you live in the real world. Nikki Fried is an awful candidate. I honestly don't know how she won her agricultural commissioner race in the first place. She has done nothing but shill for legal weed. Her number one accomplishment as agricultural commissioner was unsuccessfully suing the state of Georgia. No, literally, that actually happened. She also opposed the USMCA, even though that's really neither here nor there. But all she is capable of is trying to tweet out AOC gotcha-like attacks on DeSantis like an emotional child. And while it may bring in some resist-lib donations for her, it definitely doesn't translate to real-world votes. In fact, Ron put it best right here in this clip.
You know, Nikki Fried has done nothing in office. She does nothing. All she does is emote on social media, virtue signal to small dollar donors in California and New York. She put her face, spent millions of dollars to put her face on every gas pump across this state purely to boost her own image at your expense as a taxpayer. She's a lockdown lobbyist. She would have had our kids locked out of school the whole year. She would have had this business shuttered for the whole year. They would be out of business if Fried were governor. So she's opposed us at every turn. All the good stuff we've been able to accomplish for Florida, she opposes it. And I've done more, I think, in my first week as governor than she just done in her entire time as agriculture commissioner. One more.
Now this clip is important because it truly proves Ron's leadership skills. It also shows how he's got charisma, more so than he had a few years ago. And that makes sense. The more time you spend in a role, the better you typically get at it if you're willing to put the work in, and that's exactly what Ron has done. And honestly, in this clip, all you had to do was paint his face orange, dye his hair yellow, and you would have thought it came from a different Florida man. Charlie Crist is more measured, no doubt, but he's still likely to lose to DeSantis by close to 10 points. He lost a Senate race as an independent in 2010 by 20 to Rubio, and lost the governorship to Rick Scott in 2014 by a narrow margin. Crist's political capital is waning, and while he may be the best shot the Florida Dems have, he is no match for Big Ron. I mean, when you could only beat a TPUSA e-girl by 25,000 votes in a Biden +5 congressional district, you probably aren't capable of winning statewide. I think DeSantis beats Crist by 8 points, 53 to 45. I think he beats Fried by 13, 55 to 42. The county maps are here on screen. After the 2022 midterms, there is one big question hanging over our heads. Who does the Republican Party nominate in 2024? If Donald Trump decides to run, forget it. He's already got the nomination locked up. DeSantis won't run against him, and even quiet never-Trumpers like Nikki Haley aren't dumb enough to throw their hat in the ring either. Trump would likely run against a Romney or a Hogan, skip the debates, and win 70% of the primary vote in the early states at a minimum. If Trump does not run, I truly believe that DeSantis is the front-runner. Now, things change. This video may age very poorly in a couple of years. Brian Kemp was once seen as a 2024 contender, and look how that turned out. But the truth is, he's up in the snap polls, and many professionally conducted ones as well, despite not being as well known as others outside of the state of Florida. He definitely is the most Trump-like in appearance and personality. Unless a wild card like Tucker Carlson enters the race, DeSantis would likely have it locked up by Super Tuesday, if not even sooner. DeSantis would bring a lot of strengths to the table. He's been an unabashed conservative on most social issues, and fairly solid and pragmatic on economic issues. There are still some questions about his policy that we'll get to in a bit, but undoubtedly he is an immigration restrictionist and a social conservative who has said in the past that he could not think of one policy that he and Trump disagree on. If true, which again I have my doubts, he would arguably be a more effective version of Trump, given the fact that the media's attacks on him would not be able to stick to him as easily. They would just bounce off. Assuming that he could get Trump's base out, he would likely make up some of the lost ground in the Sunbelt suburbs, winning back Tarrant and Maricopa counties, and likely taking the state of Nevada. He has Hispanic appeal, and likely could accelerate the realignment in South Texas unlike any candidate besides maybe Trump himself. He can energize the right, maybe less than Trump, but also would lower the energy of those who so desperately despise Trump that would crawl across broken glass to vote against him for any candidate. It goes without saying that he would wipe the board with Harris in most swing states. DeSantis also understands the pulse of the conservative base. While he may not always have been a Trumpian populist 10 years ago when he was first elected to the House, it seems as if he has adapted and evolved. His trajectory is upward. His recent comments on the issue of indoctrination in our schools furthers this point. Take a listen to this clip right here.
Some of these battles with what the left is doing and wokeism, it's effectively cultural Marxism. And so you can have theoretically a successful economy, but if the underpinnings of the culture are just being torn apart, I don't think that that's a society that's going to be very successful over the long term.
That is big-time stuff. Calling out social Marxism by name is something that Trump never even did in the past 4 years. It shows that DeSantis really gets it. And mentioning the fact that the spiritual health of our nation is not determined by the GDP or the state of the stock market could not be more accurate. That's like Tucker Carlson level rhetoric right there, if anything. It seems as if he's been watching my channel. I've been saying this kind of thing for months, and that is definitely rhetoric that can win over middle America. But there are plenty of drawbacks to DeSantis and lots of unanswered questions. He is undoubtedly the best governor our nation has had in decades. He is a winner, a fighter, and is on the upward trajectory. He gets the pulse of the base, and as we're moving the Overton window of conservatism back to where it needs to be, he could be very effective. If he truly has Trump's policies and intentions in mind, he could use his political skill to work within the establishment to be a more effective Trump. But does that really entirely seem to be the case? We'll have to see. We don't know where DeSantis stands on trade and foreign policy. In fact, his voting record on the two in Congress were a bit murky. That doesn't mean he hasn't evolved on those issues the way that Donald Trump has evolved on issues such as healthcare, abortion, and gun control over the years. But there are questions about his past record that could limit him in populist, protectionist areas of the country, like the upper Midwest and Pennsylvania. Speaking of Pennsylvania, we don't know where he stands on energy. He voted against fracking in his home state of Florida, but as a conservationist, it was likely not pragmatic to drill in wildlife sanctuaries such as the Everglades. I do believe that he would likely take a little bit of a different approach to fracking in a place like Pennsylvania, but that is yet to be seen. I still think that he would win over these voters in contrast to his opposition's view on the issue, but he needs to take a more pro-energy stance to energize enough voters to win a general election. DeSantis may be more effective at passing a policy agenda through than Trump, but keep in mind that that stems from his political background as a politician. He knows politicians, and likely knows how to work with them better than Trump. However, as a politician, he is not an outsider, and could easily be bought and sold, unlike Trump. Trump was an unabashed American cultural and economic nationalist going back to the 1980s, consistently for decades, even when he was a Democrat. DeSantis may be improving on those issues, but if the donors get to him, he could easily just end up being the American version of Boris Johnson. The Bushes were solid governors too. Jeb Bush was not the worst governor, and neither was George. In fact, George Bush back in 2000 was seen as the relatively populist anti-war candidate in the race compared to Gore, ironically enough. He arguably won New Hampshire off that issue alone. That does not mean that he wasn't bought and sold when he entered the White House in a way that Donald Trump was not able to be. Trump was a threat to the system mainly for this reason alone. And unlike the Mike Bloombergs or Steve Forbeses of years past, he was a populist billionaire, and one who actually cared about the interests of the American nation and the working class. His presidency may not have accomplished all of his original agenda, and he strayed away from it a bit from time to time, but he is someone who truly sent the shockwaves necessary to disrupt the establishment. DeSantis is a skilled conservative politician, but if he is not able to stay true to his intentions, it's over for him from becoming a great leader. Trump has weaknesses, this is true. Bad staff hires, bad endorsements, bad messaging in 2020, poorly run campaign staff. But the truth is that he got a lot of good staff hires too. Maybe DeSantis would not let a Jared Kushner or a Brooke Rollins get in the way of his agenda on important issues, but those among the likes of Steve Bannon, Darren Beattie, Stephen Miller, and Steve Cortez would not likely be present in a DeSantis administration in any capacity. It is true that DeSantis does keep a very small circle of advisors and nothing more as governor, which may be a plus. And if he does not value personal loyalty as much as Trump, that also may be a plus. But some of the people that have been supporting him and pushing him are a little bit concerning. DeSantis has wide appeal. That could be a good thing, but it also has its drawbacks. It seems like everybody on the right seems to support him in some capacity. That includes everybody from National Populists like Trump and Tucker, but also has the blessings of run-of-the-mill conservatives like Steven Crowder, The Daily Wire, former Never-Trumpers like Ben Shapiro, and even hardcore Never-Trumpers like the Bush family. The MSM is no fan of him, obviously, but the conservative establishment throwing their support behind him should make one skeptical. Now, if he does decide to run for president, that may change. In a primary, I would expect Fox News and Ben Shapiro and Bill Kristol and the Bushes to throw their support behind Nikki Haley. But we will see. I'd say the floor for him as president is like a more conservative Ronald Reagan, but honestly, that may not be enough. That does not mean he doesn't have potential, and I would still back him 100% if Trump does not decide to run, but for now, I prefer Trump. Still, that doesn't let Trump off the hook for everything. He does seem lost in his messaging at times, and he's almost 80 years old. He needs to change course to win in 2024, which personally I believe he can do. He's still an anti-establishment warrior that encapsulated the hearts and minds of nearly 75 million Americans, and nobody will energize voters on the right like Trump. The best thing moving forward, in my opinion, is for Trump to change his residency to Nevada, another swing state where Trump has property in. From there, he should be able to pick DeSantis for VP constitutionally without having to forfeit 30 electoral votes. He should also hire someone like Tucker Carlson to be his chief policy strategist and recorrect his messaging back to his populist 2016 message, playing the outsider who can expand gains in the rural Midwest and actually have a pro-Trump Congress devoid of backstabbing rhinos to help him pass through his agenda. That way he truly can serve 4 years as a man not owned by the establishment and unable to seek re-election, so he can produce 4 years of results for the American people. 4 years later, DeSantis can run for president and he will likely win, given how thin the opposition's bench has become. And that's my take. Thanks for watching this video. Like for more documentary-style videos like this, comment your take down below, subscribe if you haven't yet, and hit the bell so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle, out.